Did you get a chance to, you didn't have to, but did you get a chance to hear any of our episodes by any chance?
I haven't actually,
Just
no.
to get a review from you, okay. No, alhamdulillah, it's all good.
I mean, I checked out your...
If you think we suck, just let us know.
Well, okay, yeah, I can see the pictures and...
Yeah, the guy with the hat is Mahin. I'm the guy who's bald. They call me Sim on the podcast. And
okay, I could see the picture with, is it Sa'ad Taslim?
Right, yeah. We had him on last night. Yeah, we had him on last night. He's also Abu Layth, by the way.
He's what? He's Abu Layth as well?
Yeah.
So he named his son. he named his son Layth, and he's Saad. So he's Layth.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
See, when I chose that kunya, I don't know a single person with that name, Abu Layth.
But did you choose Layth because Layth ibn Sa'ad, or?
It just sounded slick.
It sounds beautiful.
It sounds real nice.
It's a beautiful name. Yeah.
I mean, I chose it years ago, like probably year 2000 or something. So so it was, at that time I hadn't heard of anybody with the name.
And it happens to be your Maliki too. So did you know it had anything to do with the Malikis, or you just happened to do that and you specialize in Maliki fiqh?
At the time, the only Abu Layth that was known was the historic Abu Layth Samarkandi,
yes.
Hanafi faqih.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond him, I don't think any... I mean, obviously Layth ibn Sa'ad was known, but I don't think Abu Layth in any of the other madhabs was really... Even till now, I don't think it really carries I think really, I think he killed it, the Hanafi Samarkandi.
Yeah.
But beyond, I don't think anybody else really. So I thought, let me have a go at it and see if I can rock it for a while, inshallah. But yeah.
MashaAllah, man.
So, what's going on then? How are you guys doing? And what's this, the Mad Mamluks all about?
I'm glad you asked.
What comes to your mind when you see that name?
Right, okay, depends, because my mind's a crazy place, man. A lot that goes on in my mind. But I think, I mean, it sounds obviously funky and good, and so I'm understanding that you see, there's a difference here, because I'm understanding that you're doing it just as that kind of, it's just got that Muslim kind of touch to it, as Mamluks, like because of the historical, so people would assume. And then mad as in just crazy, but not crazy as in crazy, but as in unrestricted.
Exactly.
But that's what I guess. But I mean, it could be that you've actually all linking it into the actual Mamluk thing.
Yeah.
We are actually.
Yeah, because they came at a point in history where the Muslim world was almost decimated, right? So our thought was, well, the Mamluks not just the fact that the name sounds cool, but they also came to the rescue at that important historical period, where they were the last stand between the Mongols getting to North Africa, and
they were the least expected to.
Yeah, because when they stopped the Mongols at the Battle of Ain Jalut, that was the first time in history anyone had put a stop to the Mongols or beat them in the battlefront, and I think that it's I know, and we were thinking that there might be some implications of violence or something like that associated with the name, but we said it's very important for young Muslims and Muslims around the world to know the important contributions that the Mamluk have made, and we can't just be reactionary and be fearful of what the world might say about.
Don't you think, just on a side note, don't you think, you see a lot of this with the Mongols, just on a side note, don't you think, like in history, people have ignored though, or maybe downplayed, or you see, because there's a lot, like, I take it you're referring to like Nuruddin Singhi and the whole thing, but with the Mongols actually being put to a stop, don't you think it had a lot more to do with his cousin brother Barke Khan, who came down from East Europe to fight Halako?
Yeah.
And it was when he came down with his horde, then the Muslims had a strong chance against, because he totally wasn't expecting his own to turn on him. Now, because they were really powerful at the time, and so when he came, his kind of vision was within a year to kind of have conquered, the whole thing and gone into, like you're saying, North Africa and the whole thing. Now, when he had decimated Baghdad, a year earlier or a year and a half earlier, when he had met with, because they had to go back to the Great Khanate, because they needed to know who was going to be the next Great Khan.
They had the big meeting.
When he was chosen over Barke and the others, so when he let them know that I'm going to be attacking the Middle East and stuff, Barke Khan was a Muslim out of them.
Right.
And some of them had embraced Islam, some of them hadn't. Now, Barke Khan was a Muslim who said to him that you can conquer them, but don't destroy and kind of violate the religious stuff. And so obviously they had their own tiff as well, because of the fact that he was chosen as the Great Khan and the others weren't. But when he goes there, and then what he does with obviously Mu'tasim and the whole thing, and he obviously decimates Baghdad. He was told that, look, you can take over, like, I don't care, you take over, whatever, but don't kind of violate the Muslim sanctities, and don't kind of just do massacres. But he obviously did. So when he moves on from Baghdad, that reaches Barke Khan, who comes down from northeastern Europe with a great, massive, part of his horde, and who tells the Muslims that you go forward and I will attack him from behind, like, we're bringing our armies. And this is what actually leads to the destruction of Halako Khan, because he's killed in that battle in which he meets Barke Khan.
Right.
Now, but I never noticed any of a lot of the Muslims just ignore in the history, they completely either just brush it aside about Barke Khan and the whole kind of internal clash that the Mongols had because of his ransacking Baghdad.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that obviously, Nuruddin Zengi and the whole thing wasn't huge, and whatever they did have, Saifuddin Qutuz and the whole, it was huge, and they did have the whole, the Ain Jalut, whatever the thing was, instrumental. But I was just saying that it is interesting because I was kind of fascinated with history, and I remember reading through a lot of these kind of things and thinking it's really amazing that a lot of this is just missed out.
No. And every event in history, right, has so many different elements and so many different sides, right? And even until now, even in some parts of Sirah, there's so many things that happened and so many collapses that happened that are still not very heavily talked about, but it's just talked about in a general way, right?
Yeah.
Even though what was interesting is Barke Khan was Muslim.
Yeah.
Right.
So not that he wasn't Muslim, he was Muslim. So you think Muslims could have kind of claimed him.
Right, but they didn't, right?
But I think they didn't, in the sense that he wasn't bothered. Even though he's Muslim, he didn't really care that whether the Muslims got taken over by them, because he was kind of Mongol first.
Right.
And then Muslim, like he was Muslim, but to him the Great Khanate was kind of over the Caliphate. He didn't have that kind of... so which is interesting once again, and I suppose it doesn't tie in with the systematic view that... I don't know what the reason was.
Well, if you notice in the Central Asia and those republics, they will attribute a lot more to or their heritage back to the Mongols more easily than the Arab world. Well, the Arab world has a lot of bad memories with the Mongols, so they will be very reluctant to attribute any of their successes to the Mongols because the Mongols caused a lot of destruction. So I meant specifically with Barke Khan. Right.
I didn't mean that the whole Mongols as a whole, but I meant because he was in charge of the kind of the that I forgot what, but they had named them in accordance with certain colors as well. But the kind of European front that they had, the horde that they had settled there, he was the great Khan of that. Now, but he was Muslim, and I was just, it was kind of like, it kind of, I don't know, sparkled my curiosity in the sense that, well, okay, it's strange how Muslims didn't really claim him, even though he was Muslim and he came to the aid of the Muslims.
Right.
And he was one of the core reasons, if not the reason, or at least 50% of the reason that that Halako Khan was unsuccessful. But really, we don't really read much about him at all. They don't kind of even mention him. And where you do read about him, I think, is in just general history documented by the people. That they kind of speak about how he stopped this whole thing and what he was involved. And he was his cousin. He was his cousin brother. I mean, he was cousins with with Halako. But anyway, I mean, that's, I suppose, irrelevant. Anyway, coming back to your thing. So, okay, so that's good. It's kind of like fresh and revolutionary, I suppose.
And the mad portion, the reason why mad is there, it's not like, we're crazy. It's just to let people know that, everyone likes to joke around too. And we've gone crazy in a way too, with all the different experiences that we've had as far as, trying to find which flavor of Islam is the best. That kind of makes you go crazy eventually, because you try to find yourself, and then eventually you just, you end up just being a good people person, and you can laugh and you can joke, you can have fun, and you can be serious when you need to too, So it's kind of all of that combined.
Yeah, when I tried to come in the podcast, I was like, maybe we should change to the Mad Malikis, because we have a lot of Malikis as guests.
and Mahin especially is ecstatic because he's Maliki too. So having you is for him is a...
Yes, I am. Alhamdulillah.
All right. Is that Amir, or is that who?
That's Mahin. Mahin is Maliki, yes.
Yeah.
Mahin.
Yeah.
Allah. How do you say Mahin or Mahin?
I would say Mahin. Mahin's the proper way to say it.
Yeah, because Mahin sounds a bit strange in Arabic.
Yeah, it comes across as like despicable fluid or something like that.
No, if you say ma in Mahin, it's talking about despicable fluid. Yeah. If you say Mahin in Arabic, it's just referring to something despicable. So don't worry.
Okay. Because my friend jokes with me because he's Arab. He's like, my dad's name is Mufakhar al-Islam, like the great thinker of Islam, and then he named you Mahin al-Islam, like the despicable fluid of Islam.
Great hopes and aspirations.
It's like don't try to achieve too much, son. And then there's also like I think the Mad Mudcullies was just a joke. Because you're in Birmingham, right?
Birmingham, it is.
That's man, Birmingham, you got like you got spubs up there, on like the Street.
We have.
Yeah, no doubt.
What is the environment like in the UK these days? So I know when we were growing up, I think we all were kind of studying Islam at the same age. I think you're in your mid-30s, right?
I'm now, what am I, bloody hell, 38 now.
Okay, yeah. So you grew up we're all the same age here, and in the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of the rhetoric that was coming out of the UK, the American kids were just adopting that into their psyche, and they were kind of trying to figure out.
It was very interesting because it's such a small area, and you have so many different Muslim groups that are so close together, and you would hear a lot of different conversations occurring between these a bunch of the different groups.
But it wasn't just that, though. The UK community was much more well developed back then.
Yeah, a lot more. There were a few, maybe 2 generations ahead of us, right?
Yeah. So the young American kids were kind of just looking at what's coming out of the UK, and we're trying to make sense of it.
I think this developed is I think a strange word for the context. I think they were
it was just a head start they had as far as Muslim generation.
I think the thing is the UK environment is that Muslims obviously the UK generally obviously is so much smaller than the US, and then naturally proximity is something that's there, so people are closer to each other. Muslim communities live in kind of like pocket environments, so they have like enclaves, and so because they've been brought up and just amongst each other and things like that. So this is very common in the UK. Now, unlike the US where it's all spaced out. So I think that, and then the UK has that closer attachment with the Indo-Pak. So, just being closer, I suppose, than how, further away the US is. So you've got a lot more of an influx, people coming in, going out, coming in. Yeah. And then there's a lot more of the typicalness here. That's because of the wave of migration here was from rural parts of Pakistan as opposed to the cities, unlike the US, which had city folks migrating there. And here you had the rural kind of farmers and stuff kind of migrating here. So that's going to naturally produce a particular environment. So if you're going to get only kind of you're next to Bedouin-like people, kind of almost, the kind of rural countryside people moving to the UK, which they did. And then they're going to have children, which they did. Now, they're going to have a particular mindset. So unlike people who went to the US, a lot of them were already professionals, doctors, whatever, lawyers and things like this, and engineers, and they've already gone through, they're kind of a bit enlightened, and then they've moved into kind of sparse, communities are all kind of spaced out, and you've got, so they kind of, there was a lot of, I don't know if assimilation can be taken negatively, but they mixed in and blended well with where they moved to. And plus, I think the difference is that I think people who moved to America saw America as, saw themselves very clearly as American. So because America didn't have a history. So America's just been a bit neutral in the world wars, and obviously it's got a history with some parts of the world, but not with the Indo-Pak. And whereas here, Britain had obviously colonized Pakistan and India. And so people that came here saw this stark difference that we are not them. And then they obviously added religion into it as well. And it's only been a recent thing, really, since post 9/11, that people have started to openly embrace the Britishness.
Right.
And say that we are openly British because of the stress that they faced. Otherwise, pre 9/11, people openly used to say things like, I'm not British, I'm Pakistani, and I'm not like that. And they used to be very, they used to be like quite wacko, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And post 9/11, it just changed all of that. So people, they started to just be very clear about a British identity and what does it, we're British and Muslim, and that's been the whole thing. So I think these things make a huge difference. So with Islam, people growing up and then having these kind of differences, and then Islam is your identity. Like people, I'm Muslim. So they had a bit of that, head start, so to speak, on getting onto this religious bandwagon. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I can't comment, but it was what it was, and that's because it caused a lot of problems as well along the way. So you see, it caused a lot of damage, which to undo may take generations. Obviously, it did a lot of good things as well, like it brought about an interest in the deen and stuff like that, and people wanted to study or they wanted to do things. But the kind of mentality that it brought about with it, the kind of rigidity, is very, I'm sure you guys obviously face it as well, but less so, I think, in the States. So there's there is that a lot, like sectarianism is very strong.
Yeah, and that's what we wanted to kind of ask about, is that what we knew from like the early 2000s, there was a lot of, when you say sectarianism, there's a lot of different groups, since they're so in such close proximity to each other. There would be a lot of debates. How is that now in 2017? As far as an improvement is concerned, because I was always curious about that, and I get mixed reviews of what's actually happening there.
Yeah, and before Mufti comments, I want to piggyback real quick. I think I remember growing up in the deen, like again early 2000s, we looked up to y'all in the UK because y'all were so hardcore, at least from the Salafi perspective. I used to be, like I had alluded to, like I used to roll with those Salafi brothers, man, and so like Birmingham was like Darul Hijra. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were all trying to go spubs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
no, I totally do that. Hardcore thing was admired, but this is what I mean about the issue was that people were very hardcore here. Now, obviously, from one aspect, that brought a lot of people onto the deen and kind of put these blinkers and let them focus. But from the other aspect, well, the kind of damage it did in defining what deen is may take now generations to undo.
Yes.
Because, there was an interesting... Actually, I was watching a lecture of an American... it was actually Ustad Ubaidullah Evans, actually. But he was giving this talk about something, but he spoke about some research called the first effective community that migrate to a particular land. And this research that was done on this topic from a sociological perspective, and it was really interesting that he said that, you see, the thing is that when they've studied migrant communities, the first community that is born in a region, he said that they termed them the first effective community. And the actions or the views and the kind of paradigms they adopt influence generations to come. It's not like, generations after them will never have the same powerful impact that the first effective community will have. And that's very interesting because we see that here. So the Muslims, the way they defined what Islam was back then in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and that will now outlast a few generations, and people to undo that now, or to work against it, or to present counter narratives, is a battle. It's really difficult. It's a struggle. So
because you're considered a sellout if you do, right? You're considered watered down or a sellout if you do, right? If you're not as hardcore as you were back then.
What it was that they set the scene as Islam. To be religious is to be this kind of hardline, very anti-material, anti-Western, this kind of something that's just fresh out of either Pakistan or fresh out of Saudi Arabia. That kind of image, as very long beard, short shalwar. It's all about, this very super Puritanism was kind of set as the backdrop for what Islam is. And Islam is by contrasting it with the other. And the other is the Western. So now Islam kind of, to them, the center is like the periphery defines the center, and the periphery is the West. So to be opposed or to be other than the other, in this sense here, the West, is what makes you Islamic.
Yes.
Now, having this kind of a backdrop has now kind of just settled in. And even people who, whereas I think in America they didn't, although I'm sure you guys do have the things there as well, but it was many things were just seen as natural as well. So I think you guys, so for example, I don't think dress was as big of an issue over there. I could be wrong, but I don't think it was. Also, being American wasn't something that was seen as like anti-Islamic. Now even here, so certain things have had amendments. So being British now, they have to openly claim to be British. But I think that the problem is they set the scene so much. So I understand when you're saying that people used to look up to, the Muslims used to look up to the UK and they used to look up to Birmingham.
A lot of it, I think a lot of it when I was growing up, a lot of it had to do with the accent too. The accent kind of threw a very regal, elegant twist to even something that may seem so simple, because you hear us now, and I live with British guys on all of my travels. And it was, they would say to us, I still remember one of my friends, he's like, keep talking, it sounds like we're watching a film from Hollywood, and we'd hear them talk and we'd think of like, oh, tea and crumpets now, isn't it? Or isn't it? We think of something very Queen's English like.
I wish they all had that accent. They got God.
So the accent I've spoken, what was that? What would that be considered in the UK?
What? Sorry.
The accent that I just spoke. Which part of UK which accent would they be? Because I know you guys have lots of accents and even make fun of certain accents.
Lots of accents here, but I think
the one with the in it.
In it.
Oh, the in it.
Yeah. The cockney.
It's like, you see, because a lot of Muslims don't. Unfortunately, I think now people are working on it though, but previously they weren't too focused on. First, they weren't focused on education anyway, but secondly, they weren't too focused on expression and being articulate or trying to work on language skills. And unfortunately, a lot of Muslims do have it's very poor, the standard of English that they have. I suppose overall it's improving now with the younger lot, but it's partially to do with the fact that they grew up in certain areas that were all kind of closet enclaves of just Muslims. And then at home, they never spoke English. And then because they dropped out of education as well. So the English that they would only hear is either what's going to be on TV, which fair enough would be decent, or it's going to be what they just hear from other people on the street, which wasn't. And so you get, it's very, unlike the Americans. I have to say, most Americans that whether it's the ulama or whether it's anybody that we hear speaking, and I don't mean just on TV, I mean people that come over, they are actually, they can express themselves very well. Very well. I think so anyway. I mean, even when we used to study, all the American lot were very articulate, compared, relatively speaking.
And when you're talking about the studies, where did you get a chance to study with Americans and just throwing that
all over, everywhere I went, there were Americans there. So, I mean, initially in the late 90s, I went to study in Damascus. And so I was there for a little while in Syria back then in 97, 98, I think going into 99 like that. So there were Americans there. There were several Americans there. Then when I went to Pakistan, so I studied in Pakistan. I studied first in Islamabad, then in Karachi. Now in Karachi, in the madrasa, there were several, loads of Americans. In fact, people like, I don't know if you know, Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangra.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So he was from the same institute that I went to. So he was senior to me. But over there, like we knew each other, like I'd met him, we might just say salam and stuff. And obviously he was senior, so he was kind of finishing when I was joining there.
And was this Darul Uloom Karachi or?
I think that's Binoria, right?
Binoria, yes.
Okay.
So we never used to chill out much. I never used to chill out with him or anything, but I got to know him more once I left and graduated. But there were other people there as well that I think they're keeping a low profile now in America. I don't think they do much. So there were people like, there was one guy called Sibra. He had a brother called Noor. I think they're from New York. There was another guy called Naif, American. There was a guy called Tamim. I don't know if you know him. He's in, I think, California. I gotta say, they had it good though, even over there. Americans are always kind of very chilled out. You see, this is the thing. It's strange because our impression of Americans is that they're very cool, very chilled out. But then it's strange because in certain things they don't seem like you expect them to be. Like on the religious front, I expect them to be a lot like very chilled out and cool. Now, I think they appear to be like that, but when you start discussing actual religious stuff with them, a lot of them are not actually like that.
I think it depends who you're talking to also. And I mean, possibly,
Well, I wonder if Mufti's, I wonder if you're alluding to the issue of like us just being too politically correct and like not getting humor. Like, remember when Abu Isa made some jokes a few weeks ago on International Women's Day, man? Like people here got freaking real. What?
Years ago,
yeah. A few years ago. Yeah, people got like real upset.
Hashtag fire Abu Isa.
Yeah, and it was like, and then all the Brits were like, that's just normal British humor. There's nothing offensive about that. And Americans were like trying to get him to lose his job.
Yeah, I think the thing is that even here, I think you see somebody like Sheikh Abu Isa, he's very, he's out there with his humor. So he's good like that, as in, he's got this humorous front. and he cracks jokes and he provokes things but I don't think a lot of people are like that here. I think most are not. I think in fact most people are very serious, and although I remember that thing that when all these people and he was like, all these feminazis are after me. But he's good like that in the sense, he's very down with humor.
He's jolly, yeah.
But, what do you think about the feminist movement that's coming out of America particularly?
I mean, I'm not really. You see, I don't think I kind of cross paths much with things like feminism, and it depends because I know there's some American feminists that I think like my stuff sometimes, and that sometimes they might send me questions and things like that. So I get this impression that sometimes, like I think I've upset a few on my Monday nights with Mufti.
Well, you come across as a guy who's very in touch with his masculine nature, and you work out, and you speak plainly. You're not a guy who's really super careful about offending people, but
that's why we got you on the show, man.
I think it's all a front. No, the thing is that, you see, because on women issues, I've spoken out for saying, like condemning like any kind of discrimination against women and things like this. So that could be seen from some as, like a modern aspect. And from some, it could be seen as well, that's, so for example, like women should be allowed to go to the masjid, women should be allowed to do this. Women, when I was highly condemned for certain fatwa which I still say, but like, so for example, women can do things like pluck eyebrows, can cut their hair, they can. I even gave the fatwa, which was, I would say, was quite radical, but that I gave the fatwa that doing wudu whilst having nail polish or nail varnish, whatever, that's absolutely fine. That you can. So I've given, because of these kind of issues and topics that I've touched up on that have, that are to do with women. So people, you see, I think that kind of leaves people in a way that, so people ain't too sure. So some women that, let's say, that are quite feminist, they may be drawn to these kind of opinions and think, well, I like what this guy's saying. A lot of but then other things, when I've been asked, I think it kind of upsets them.
Right.
So recently when I was asked about things like polygamy and stuff like this, and I was asked to speak about relationships, and I don't really do stuff like that much. I don't speak about stuff like relationships, and I said, look, I don't really see what, it's just life. And I said we should just appreciate things the way science teaches us, that we have a nature that has evolved, and we are, in essence, we are animals, we are creatures. That's all we are, and you got to kind of, there's no point denying that aspect. And so I think this kind of stuff obviously upset, because people want a very, and I think this is actually maybe more of it may be found more in America than in the UK, but it is in the UK as well. But people want this nice kind of airy-fairy image presented. And I know right now there's this whole market for things like, all about like love, and all about kind of relationships, and the ideal kind of relationships, and the one, and nurturing, and all this kind of stuff. And so I think people may expect, I don't know, maybe they expected me to be also down that kind of lane, but I wasn't. So I was just saying, look, people should just be real, and life is life, and just
well,
go with it.
The trend over here now is somehow getting Islam to merge with liberalism, and somehow finding a balance so that Islam and liberalism are compatible with each other. So that's where a lot of the debates are happening.
That's interesting, because I've never understood truly what the Americans mean by liberalism. Because, you see, because a mate of mine and me, we were having this discussion perhaps a few weeks back. Now, I said because the Americans, you see, the term liberal over here is positive, but in America it's really negative. So I don't I've seen people on social media say things like, "Oh my God," like they really condemn things, and they'll say, and it's like an insult. Like they'll use the
He's
term
such a liberal.
But they'll say like, "Oh my God," like Western media and liberalism, and we don't understand what that exactly what because you see, we understand liberalism to mean like less control, less authoritarian. That's what the term actually in essence means, like something that is less authoritarian, and the opposite of liberalism is more authoritarian. So you would assume that in this age, like people are moving towards less authority. But I'm not sure because over there it is so I'm not quite sure exactly because I have heard this, you know what you're saying now, I've heard this on social media, but I've not understood it. I've read people's posts and things like this saying, "Oh my God, this is like basically it's the apocalypse almost. It's apocalyptic how people want to, they want to, this Western, not just Western, but this liberal, they want to kind of, the liberal agenda, that's it, the liberal agenda. And I've not understood what that exactly means. And so I thought, I wonder what they mean by it, but they probably mean something else. So I'm not exactly sure what do they mean when they say?
I think the liberal agenda means like trying to be pushing the most liberal interpretation of Islam. Like, for example, how you were saying, painting the woman's fingernails and performing wudu.
Does it just mean less strict?
Yes, less strict, or even trying to make some more controversial subjects, like not necessarily there is even controversy about homosexuality in Islam, but that somehow allowing homosexuals to or that type of behavior to be accepted in our community.
As long as they're good people, but they can practice whatever they want to practice, even if they're Muslim, and we shouldn't judge them. But I think adding on to that also, to be in all fairness, on a political level, liberalism can mean something. On a theological level, liberalism can mean something. And I think that's a problem with a lot of these terminologies, is that I don't think anybody has a set definition, which is why I think it's become a little chaotic.
Because I've struggled with stuff like that. I do understand that, you see. This is why I wrote something a while back saying that I completely am against these terms, liberal and conservative. And I feel that people have tried to hijack Islam with these terms. And I said what's interesting is, for once, it's the people who are, it's the people who would be deemed conservative, as in the traditional, the very strict puritanical people who are anti-West, have adopted this Western rhetoric. And it's almost ironical, but they've only done it because they feel it lands them in a good light. So in the West, this term, this kind of philosophy arose from Europe against the authority of the state and the authority of the church, but primarily against the authority of the state. So to be like authoritarian was kind of deemed oppressive. And it was to be free from that was liberal. Now this, you see, because that exact parallel didn't exist in the Islamic world on a similar term. So they never had these terms. Now, what's happened is here, this is obviously carried through into politics as you have today, although, literally speaking, all political parties, like let's say in the UK, are still liberal parties, but they may call themselves conservatives, but they may be more conservative compared to the other one, but they are actually still liberal, all of them, because Western democracy has embraced that kind of, liberalism. Now, Muslims have then adopted this to define religion, which is so new, because I've asked people that explain to me from the past then what was the equivalent words in Arabic that the scholars used. Because even today, in Arabic, they just say the word liberali.
Yeah.
And they use the word
There is no Arabic word for it.
left. And I've said, well, you see, because if this means being less strict, then that's weird, because that's not what liberalism is in the West. Like, liberalism isn't about, it's about control. It's not about strictness. Like, so if you say strictness, then you would assume, this is what I say to people, that you would assume when you read the hadith about the Prophet that he always chose ease over strictness.
Yeah.
Now, so then people say, yeah, but it's about, so it's really interesting that these terms are pushed by people who are very puritanic and usually almost anti-Western in a lot of their things.
And you know what, Sheikh, the thing that I find that's closest to liberalism, is, at least defined in the West, is kind of like mutasahil in all matters. You know, like mutasahil, not choosing what's sahil, because I mean, or what.
Can you explain those words?
Yeah, what's easy, right? Because Rasulullah chose, if there was two things that were halal, he'd choose the most easiest, right? But one thing that I've seen as far as liberalism is considered somewhat like mutasahil, how we refer in the Arabic language.
You see, because this is my point, but wouldn't that just be subjective?
It would. You're right. I agree with you.
So
it would be subjective.
Mutasahil compared to being strict. But there's an underlying assumption that religion is here to be strict. Then.
You're right. I agree with you.
The question would be, where do we get that assumption from, that religion came to be strict? Except, this is an assumption, isn't it? But we're either learning it from the religion or we're carrying it from somewhere else, that religion came to be strict. I would assume that religion came to connect us with one God. It didn't come to be strict.
I think it depends on reality you're in, though, right? I think if you're living in a Muslim-dominant country or Islamic government, you know, being with the sahil or with it being extreme or being too easy on things would not, you know, the lines would be, you know, easily. It'd be easy to differentiate or identify what would be extreme or what's not. But when you're living in the West, the problem now is when you're living in as a minority in any Muslim country, is
non-Muslim country,
a majority non-Muslim country.
Yeah, non-Muslim country.
Majority non-Muslim country is that there's no real authority to really make sure that, you know, everyone's in line and to make sure. You know, so
I'm just saying, you know, this drawing the line.
Yeah.
What makes us, like, where do we get this idea of where the line ought
exactly
to be?
So that's what I'm saying, right? So what I was going to say is that when Muslims were a minority in any country, they felt like they had to hold on to their Islam very tightly, or if they don't, then Islam's going to wither away and it's going to go away. So how do we do that? We made sense somehow that the stricter you are, and the more when there's no room to interpret, unless going back to classical texts and not going away from that. I think that's where it comes from, right? Is because when Muslims are a minority.
That would be, you see, that would be an explanation to it being a reaction. So it's a defense mechanism, but it would demonstrate that in itself, the explanation would demonstrate that it's not accurate.
No,
it's just a defense mechanism to hold on.
A lot of people will cite hadith where, you know, a Sahaba, when he's doing wudu, I forgot which Sahaba this was, but he would throw water under his eyelids, you know, so much so that...
Like Ibn Umar did that.
Right.
Now, when he did ghusl, for example, he would wash, but he was condemned by the other companions for doing that.
Okay.
Yes.
And the thing is, you see, this is where I asked people, I said, well, how would you define Ibn Abbas then? Would you define him as a liberal? Because he said temporary marriages are okay. He said riba, partially 50% doesn't exist. He said he was known for his ease in everything. And
I think that's where the different... Oh, sorry. Yeah, continue. I'm sorry.
No, I'm being mutasahil in things like, some of the harshest issues, he didn't really recognize them.
I think that's why it's up to the jurists, right? I think the jurists that are Ahl al-Dhikr, the people that are specialists in that knowledge, they're always going to have their own opinions, which is why fiqh is such a beautiful thing, right? And I think
because they never had this paradigm of this term called liberal and left and right.
You're right.
They obviously
I agree.
never used these words because this narrative didn't exist with them.
No, of course. So, and instead of calling them liberal, they would just disagree with them, right? Or a body like Abdullah bin Umar, they would say you should do, but there was no label for it.
Yeah, because in Islam, they would just see that, look, an opinion is backed by evidence.
Yes.
If you have evidence, you have an opinion.
Yes.
I may disagree with it, but it's an opinion. Like, they didn't have a linear understanding that there is a center, there is a right, there is a left. They didn't have this concept.
They didn't.
They just had an understanding that, like, well, I don't think you're accurate, but I don't think you're valid, but you have your evidence.
Yes.
Now, so for example, Abu Hanifa, not today the Hanafi madhab, but Imam Abu Hanifa was deemed incredibly, I mean, by these standards, incredibly liberal.
Okay, at his time, yes, he was.
Yeah, like he considered so many things permissible. What other people deemed alcohol, he deemed permissible. What other people deemed things like how you pray, oh, it's okay. You can do it in Persian. You can do this in Turkish. You can do this in, not Turkish, but Persian. You can, his rulings were constantly known for things like hiyal, loopholes.
Yes, of course.
In fact, to the extent that Imam Muhammad, he has this book, Kitab al-Hiyal, the book of loopholes. Now, the thing is, or what's attributed to him anyway. So the thing is that this would then be deemed like very liberal.
It would. You're right.
If we're going by an understanding of strictness. But my point is that since when would strictness become the definitive marker for, or even a guideline for what religion is?
Is it fair to say that the classic Islamic scholarship operated out of a paradigm of truth? Rather than conservative or liberal, they just wanted to know what is the truth of the matter and arrive at the correct conclusion, rather than trying to find out a middle ground or even go towards a liberal position or a conservative position.
And I personally think a lot of it has to do with the colonialism and the way Muslims were colonized too. Because if you see all the stories when people talk about Umar radiallahu anh, and especially from Muslims that come from the subcontinent that are living in the West, they always talked about how strict he was, on certain things to let Muslims know, hey, you have to raise your bar of Islamicness, if you want to say, right? But I completely agree with you about Imam Abu Hanifa. He would be considered nowadays. He would be considered somebody that's liberal. But I think the slight difference is that when Westerners talk about Islamic liberalism, they're talking about which is clearly haram. And I met some people. And what they see as liberalism is they see that Islam made something clearly haram, but you're trying to make it halal to not push people away from Islam. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the other extreme of liberalism. And I don't think that Westerners, because these terminologies, and we don't use its proper application, right? And we made it a religious thing. I think if you ask 10 different people what liberalism is, you're going to get 10 different opinions. That's a problem with labels, right? And that's a problem.
No, but I mean, liberalism has an understanding, though. It is because it's a philosophy, and it did originate. It's like it originated as an anti-authoritarian movement, and that's what it still is today. In essence, it's about fighting authoritarianism. Now, it is seen as like being trendy and stuff like this. That is true because it's the kind of in thing.
Yes. Because
they see what was previous as being kind of harsh and controlling.
Of course.
So it's kind of fighting controls and controlling mechanisms. And in essence, I'm just saying, I do recognize, obviously, there will be, political. So depending where you are, people may vary on but the Islamic thing is interesting because, you see, when you say something is clearly haram, the question is clearly haram according to who?
I agree with you, yes.
Because, you see, once again, it's making an assumption that certain things are very clear. Now, you see, there are some things in Islam which are very clear.
Yes.
Very clear. But I would say they are so few, and only at a great level are they accepted as clear. So, for example, saying God is one. We accept that at a very great level.
Yes.
Once we start to learn more about Allah, we all disagree on how Allah is, who is He, what does He do, how does He behave. Everybody disagrees, but they accept God essentially as one.
Yes.
When we say things about, for example, we pray, there are 5 prayers in a day.
Yeah.
We accept that as a broad universal.
Yeah.
Once you start speaking about how you should pray, should they be combined? Should they be right? And you okay? Okay. Oh my God. You alright?
Oh, who is that little one?
That's Layla.
Assalamu alaikum, Layla. Are you okay? What happened, Layla? Somebody bothering you?
All right, well,
I'm sorry. Is somebody bothering you?
Her mischief is It's usually
this is like that news anchor moment that went viral on the internet.
That would have been if my other one came through.
but
do more than that.
Before we continue,
everything here.
Mufti, before we continue, I'm just letting you know my inner need or inclination to speak in a British accent it's erupting now, and I'm trying to put a cover on it. So if I go out on these weird fits, please don't take offense to it. Okay? And before we get into, we're going to continue this conversation. But brothers, remind me because there's a confession I have to make. And I have a confession to make.
Give me your father, for I have sinned.
Yes, but after we were having a really good discussion, I don't want to ruin the discussion with some.
I'll remind you.
Yeah,
but
please remind
there's one thing I want to chime in on. The other angle that a lot of people talk about, as far as being strictness, as far as coming from a strict angle, is that they say there's it's directly being strict or being scrupulous or having what we call wara, right? Is directly proportional to like how one feels with their iman, right? I'll give you an example. It's of high contention. I don't know how big this issue is in the UK, but in the US and especially here in Chicago Sharif, it's always the Zabiha meat, non-Zabiha meat issue, right?
Okay.
So
that's what defines you as a Muslim here, by the way.
Yeah. Like,
is that the hot thing right now?
That's the thing. It's always been the thing. It's always been the thing. It's never gone away, especially in Chicago.
And it's never going to go away.
You know, but part of the, the angle is, okay, well, if I eat, only Zabiha meat, this is good for it's like, again, I'm controlling what goes into my stomach, and it's part of scrupulousness, and some people will even push it to the point of...
Is that to do with, just so I understand it better, is it Zabiha, non-Zabiha, or is it to do with things like stunning?
Everything. Yeah, I think it even has to do with the way it's cut, whether it's a vertical cut or it's a horizontal cut.
Stunning is part of the
stunning is too.
There is this topic about, so for example, I think certain meat is stunned and then sacrificed. But you see, one is clear, like I just walk into McDonald's and eat from McDonald's. And are you talking like that, or are you talking about it's still halal, but as in Muslim meat being provided, but it's just it's being stunned first? Is that what we're talking about? Or are we talking about?
No, we're talking about the whole gamut. Like, for example, like just to generalize here a little bit, like for example, a lot of the Arab mashayikh in America, in their communities, like they'll say, "Sheikh, our imam says we can go in and get a Big Mac at McDonald's." No problem.
As long as you say Bismillah and eat it, right?
Yeah, or not even that. They'll just say, you say Bismillah for everything. Yeah. It's not that the Bismillah is a qualifier to make it halal.
I'm saying some people believe that, though.
I don't think the imam's saying that,
No,
though.
not the imams.
Yeah. Right. You know what I'm saying? So there's that angle, and then, you have a lot of that. And then, others on the opposite end, you'll have a lot of their certified agencies, like, okay, there's only like 6, we investigated their practices, and there's only 6 or 7 restaurants in the city, for example, that you guys should be eating at because everything else is questionable, and we need to be careful about what we ingest, etc. But it does go as far as openness. It's pretty much like a lot of Muslims here will just say, we'll eat anything as long as it's not pork, it's fine, or it's not, or as long as there isn't like clear cross contamination, it's fine. And they say this is what my imam, like my local imam said, or a lot. Even there's mashayikh in America that push that.
I get the picture. So that's very different from the UK then. So here, most Muslims will not just eat clearly, like they won't just walk into, let's just say, a regular English butcher and just pick up meat from there. They won't walk into McDonald's and just order a Big Mac. Most Muslims won't. I don't know about some. I know the Salafis a while back gave the fatwa it was okay, and it was bloody weird. But and interestingly enough, it was given by the American shiuch that came over. But most Muslims here won't do that. But then that is coupled with the fact that we have plenty of halal outlets. So we have so many takeaways and like whatever burger places or whatever you want to call them that are actually run by Muslims. Like so many that you'd have to, in fact, I don't even think you'd be able to find, you'd have to go so out of your way to find a non-Muslim place. So I don't think here, I think the issue is more to do with the stunning and so there's some organizations that say we are the authority. and basically
that's the same thing here too.
Be certified through us.
That's the same thing here too. Yeah.
Yeah, so other organizations are like, whatever. And so that's the issue here. But you're right, that is different where, you're just eating outright anything as long as it's not pork. It doesn't matter who, what, KFC, McDonald's, whatever it is, makes zero difference as long as it's not pork. Okay, that's very different to here.
On a side note, is it true that majority of Nando's branches are now run by Muslims in the UK?
I don't think majority, no, but I think all of these major, so for example, KFC, Nando's, they do have halal stores here as well, like halal. So in Birmingham, the Nando's in Birmingham, I don't go to Nando's much, but I mean, I know they are halal. The KFC is halal. One of them at least, or two of them here, two KFCs in Birmingham are halal. I'm not sure about McDonald's. The KFC, I have to say, are bloody tasty, man. God damn.
Bloody tasty. There's not supposed to be any blood in it, Sheikh.
I've had to cut back because I've been kind of dieting from junk food. But it tastes so good. Oh, my God.
The last thing I wanted to comment, because there's a couple things we want to get to. Sure. As a layman, and when we're looking at opinions and whatnot, like I'm a muqallid in the Maliki in the madhab, right? I just kind of, I have relationships with mashayikh. In Chicago, alhamdulillah, we have Ustad Ubaidullah Evans, like you alluded to earlier.
Sheikh Hamza Maqbool.
Right.
Sheikh Hamza Maqbool, and then Sheikh Yusuf Rios.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Who's the third one? Did you say?
Sheikh Yusuf Rios.
Okay, I'm not so sure. I don't know if I've come across Sheikh.
Yeah,
he's check him out on Facebook, inshallah.
Yeah, check him out. He's studied with Sheikh Ahmed Tahar Rayyan in Egypt.
Oh, mashallah,
yeah.
Awesome.
So so I'm studying a couple of books with these with them. But even within that, there's like disagreement. There's like you'll find like, okay, there's a mashhur opinion, and I know you, for example, have had debates with other Malikis. As far as they accuse you of going outside the majority opinion, and
even when Sheikh Hamza Maqbool was here, we spoke about it when he came to my house, and we, he kind of chilled out with us for a little while, for a few days, and so on some of the days we had a bit of a chat about this as well. But you're right, there is this, and a few other people. So there's this kind of. You see, which I suppose, it'll be questioned by people, but my take, what I would call the institutionalization of the deen, or in this particular case, to narrow it down, of the Maliki method, which I have issues with anything being institutionalized. Like, I feel that once something has been institutionalized, it kind of robs it of the true spirit that it had. But carry on. Yeah.
And one thing I just wanted to make clear, even for our listeners, is that if we're a part of something, especially in the deen, excuse me, you have to fit a certain description, right? And if you don't fit that description, then you don't have any credibility. And the thing that really caught my attention with yourself, mashallah, is that you kind of get rid of those lines of somebody has to fit a description to be a scholar. And I mean that in a very positive way, because if they listen to your talks, which I listen to, and I actually do a pretty good impersonation of you. That's what I wanted to see if we can air that. I wanted you to see if it was
let's hear it right now. Let's start off with that.
Just before I get into that, is that you have gotten rid of those lines, and now you have somebody. I mean, mashallah, and I say bismillah, mashallah, somebody who looks like a borderline bodybuilder. He knows, he has good, very cool taste in clothing, mashallah.
Have you seen Jersey Shore Shake, by any chance?
No.
Have you ever watched that show?
Don't make that comparison.
Somebody said that to me. They said, oh my God, is this guy Mufti? He looks like he's come out of Jersey Shore. I had to quickly Google it, and I was like, all right, that's a compliment.
And you could tell, I mean, you got a taste in fades, getting a fade in the hair, and mashallah, the hair, even though you come back from, well, that's another question I had before I do the impersonation, is when you make those Facebook Live videos, are you usually coming back from the gym, or do you do it like as soon as you come back from the gym?
Sometimes, but sometimes no. Sometimes I've just been working. Sometimes I'm coming back from somewhere. Sometimes it is from the gym.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a mishmash. You see, before, on a few of them, I used to sit down like this, like I'm now, just a T-shirt, like I am at home. Then I was told by some of my crew that, look, listen, you gotta, too many people are kind of making a fuss. And I was like, I don't give a damn. Then when I say, nah, come on, please, Mufti, put something on.
Put something on.
Man. I like this guy.
What I do is I just put like my jacket on.
Yes.
And just sit down and do the dars like that. So I try to have like a jacket or something, or a coat or something on, just to calm people down a bit.
And the reason why I said about the impersonation is, if we could cut this out if you don't like it, is that actually impersonating somebody can be a type of ghiba, right? So I don't want to fall into that trap. So I told the guys, when the guy said that you were going to be on, and I was doing it positive ways, I was like, man, I love this guy. I even love him so much. I think I can impersonate him too, of when he sits down and he starts it. So one thing I realize is whenever you start it, you are looking at your device and it starts off the same all the time. And it's awesome. And I think that's kind of like your signature in the beginning, right? And there's a different signature in the end. So when you start off, I always see that you're looking at the screen and you just say, all right, here we go. Let me see if this is working now. And then you grab your water or whatever it is you drink, and you make me thirsty when you do this, because I feel like drinking water or some Coke or a fizzy drink, as you say, afterwards. So you sip and you go, all right, let's begin now. So it really makes me excited. Wallahi, I love it. Wallahi, and I'm saying it because I love you for the sake of Allah. I'm not trying to make fun of you. It kind of like, I'm look forward to that beginning. That's the hook that gets me in.
I'm gonna be conscientious.
No. See, I didn't want that to happen. Keep doing it. Keep doing it, brother. Keep doing it, because it makes it it makes me happy. It does.
There's authenticity to it.
It is. There is, and that's what makes you. Just do you. And I didn't make it for you to be conscientious or be self-conscious. It's just, I'm only joking. Yeah, but just keep doing it, man, because literally when you drink, and sometimes you got ice cubes in that cup and it's full all the way. Oh, yeah. Is it Coke that you're drinking? Is it Pepsi? What is it?
Yeah, so normally it's usually like Pepsi Max and ice, and sometimes I've mixed a few drinks in, so sometimes there's a bit of like a 7-Up mojito mixed in there, or there's
look at you.
Sometimes an energy drink mixed in there.
And that's why I asked about the gym thing, because you seem like you got a nice pump in your muscles when you're drinking it, and it seems like you're really thirsty at the same time. And that's actually contagious, right? When somebody seems like they're thirsty and they're drinking something really cold and they're sipping it and you hear the noise, it makes you thirsty too. Wallahi, it makes you thirsty. So I was like, man, this guy's a G. Look at the way this guy starts off. He starts off the same all the time, and he doesn't care. He just does it how he wants to. You know what I'm saying? See, even Sim, he's drinking water right now because we're talking about drinking cold stuff.
I've actually got my drink right here. Yeah. That's it. Try to just catch up on my drinks, but so.
And if you want us to edit this part, we can edit it, because we don't want people to come across and think we're making fun of you.
No. It's good. It's good.
Sheikh Amir is so careful about offending anyone.
That's the least of my. My humor is usually way overboard. That's nothing. That's extremely mild.
Wow. So like, this whole thing, all right. I used to, when I first got hip to you.
Oh, that's how it starts off too.
All right. No, because even hashtag. Yeah. It was like, even when I was talking to him, it's like, Salaam alaikum Mahin, all right. And you would hashtag it. People would be like, hashtag, all right, like 4 A's, right? Like, is that how you just talk? Or is that like a common thing in the, like, where did that, you kind of coined that, but like, I gotta ask, like, where did that come from?
I don't know where it came from, to be honest with you. I don't know, honestly. I've been saying it for so long. I honestly don't know. And I think it was only, I became conscientious of it after it was pointed out to me. So I think when, people, I'm not right now, I mean like years back, but when they pointed it out before that, I was doing it before that as well, but I don't think I was noticing it until a few people pointed it out. I don't know where it's just there. It's unfortunately part of the package now. So.
And another thing I wanted to ask you is, as far as, there you go, but now I got to get something to drink. Hold on. All right. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you is, how did you, the whole promoting working out and lifting weights and and martial arts and all that. I think in one of your episodes you did promote martial arts, or you alluded to the fact that you did some type of martial arts. How did you kind of just get into this and promote it very well?
Working out thing, I think. I got into that a little while back, and I just think it's definitely something that ought to be part of the scene. I mean, I think people aspire to it anyway.
Yeah.
You see, if you look, like if you can improve your health, it will have an overall impact on every aspect of your life. Every aspect, from just the way you conduct yourself, to how you feel about yourself, to everything in life. It will increase your confidence. It will just have an overall positive impact. And I think it's something that Muslims, we ought to do. I'm not saying people don't do it, but I think especially in the religious circles, it was like we've got a bit of a stereotype, this kind of, gutted, this Molvi with a big gut and sitting there and, biryani loving and, just eating halwa. And I'm not saying it's true, but we've got a stereotype.
No, I agree with you. I fit that description, by the way.
and I
He's
think
being
that
humble.
I think that needs to be done away with, and have somebody that people like. We need certain stereotypes that people would think, like they wouldn't feel ashamed of associating with religion and themselves. So they wouldn't feel like, because if you asked a lot of regular Muslims, like, oh, imagine here's an imam, or here's a sheikh, or here's a maulana, and he's going to represent you. Like, he's going to represent you. Like, so you have to be with him physically. And he's going to talk. Like, I think a lot of people would actually be embarrassed. They may not say it openly just out of respect, but I think a lot of people will be embarrassed. And especially, young people, they kind of feel a bit uncomfortable, and they feel like, like it's a bit, like
especially if they're very much into
me. I'm representing my religion.
Yeah, I think especially if they're very much into optimizing their body and utilizing their body to its full potential. I think I can kind of see that.
I think it's a great thing. And then, to be fair, it's something which we do find in our tradition, and I have kind of tried to share this on a few occasions. Like, people like Imam Malik was so into things like this that it was known about him that he would emphasize having a strong build. And he used to often say that, he said, many a people of knowledge, that through their build, he said, because of their build, like, people hold them in awe. When they speak, people listen. And he said, and because of that, they honor knowledge. And he said that there's many people he'd seen who had these kind of shriveled up bodies. Mm-hmm. And he said that they held great knowledge, but because of their presence, right, or the lack of knowledge, was disrespected. And he himself was, somebody could say, obsessed about eating a daily portion of meat. And they say he would eat every day.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, in his time, it wasn't common to be eating meat every day in the Salaf, because he's like from the Atba'u Tabi'een. And so he says like almost 2 dinars worth of meat every day he would eat. And when he was asked, he said that it helps me maintain my posture and my build. And he said to somebody that if I have to, because he was criticized for this, so some ulama actually wrote to him saying that you're indulging in the dunya and this and that. And he said, if I had to sell the wood of my roof to buy my daily portion of meat, I would do it.
SubhanAllah. Wow, that's amazing.
And this was Imam Malik. And so I think that over time we've, it's not that we haven't got this as part of our legacy, but we've kind of drowned it out. And we've standardized a model which doesn't focus on these things. And I think the first thing we see is appearance about people, and obviously we listen to them as well, so that's important too, but we see, and that impacts us. And so
that's very true. Yeah, people don't like to talk about that because, again, we're in this world where we want to say, well, it's what's inside that counts, but as a human being, that's the first thing you see, right? And whether we like it or not, we say we shouldn't judge people, but human beings are always judging people, even though they're anti-judging people, right? It happens, right? There's nothing us as human beings can do about it.
It's not just from a judgmental perspective. It's from an aesthetic perspective.
Of course, aesthetic, of course.
They're drawn to something that you see your body, like as an example, if you work on it, enhance it, it has a kind of charm to it.
Yes.
That's natural. That's part of nature.
It beautifies it.
People to it. Like it will, and through that, people will also respect you. People may, they may admire the fact that they may aspire to work out, but they would want to also maybe listen to what you have to say. They will, and having the opposite has the opposite effect. The averse kind of, it draws people, it repels people. So being kind of like all scruffy or, just being, it repels. That people don't like that because it's not natural. It's not, I know I suppose it can be natural, but it's not what
it doesn't awestruck people, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. And so that's the whole working out thing. But I just enjoy it anyway. I mean, it's something, you see, I don't do a lot of things. I wish I could. You see, many things that I do them because I'm just being myself. I'm just being me. It's not because I'm doing them sometimes with this grand kind of vision in mind. I'm just doing it because, yes, it has these benefits, and yes, it does it, but I want to do it.
Yes.
And I don't want to pretend not. So people would say, look, why do you dress this way? It's because it's how I dress. So people say, yeah, but, why don't you, in front of people, just put on a jubba or put on a shalwar, which I have done and do at sometimes. But the point is, why don't you do this more often? It's not so difficult to do something like that. But I have this thing of I don't want to play pretend.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to kind of, and I've said to people that, look, I feel that those people who want that as a role model, people who want somebody wearing an imama, wearing a thobe or shalwar kameez or things like this, they've got hundreds of thousands of role models.
Yes.
They've got hundreds of thousands of people like that.
You're right.
Around the world. But you don't get many people that will just be normal or be like, especially, if they're from the West, will be just casual. So, and they are also Muslims that may want to connect to the deen. So to them, like, we'll just, inshallah, at least kind of hopefully maybe show such people that, look, this is fine to just be who you are.
That's really important,
and be connected to the deen. It's not, you don't, and maybe I can be a role model for them. So the other people who don't want that, well, they've got hundreds of thousands of people to kind of follow, to be a part of, to do things. And whereas the other Muslims who don't want to be like that, but want to be connected to the deen, are then left with the impression that to be connected to the deen, I have to look like that.
Yeah.
And they think, well, I can't look like that for whatever reason. Hence, I can't connect to the deen.
And they even think they're bad Muslims sometimes, the way they're led to believe.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though they're practicing Muslims, they're good people. But if they don't look a certain way, they actually feel that they're bad Muslims,
It's so true because we had this discussion. I mean, it was a bit of a hypothetical. I don't mean to. I said it's interesting that, look, we were speaking about a particular celebrity in. Actually, we were speaking about Junaid Jamshed, who's passed away. May Allah grant him Jannah. And the thing is, I was saying as a thought experiment. You see, he was seen as a kind of icon for people in terms of fashion. Yeah, like it was a bit ahead of my time, but this is when I was reading up after his tragic accident. Now, the thing is that it said that he introduced a lot of fashion into Pakistan in the early 90s. Following martial law, he introduced like the jeans, the leather jacket, the stuff like this, and thereby inspired a whole generation. Now, you see, the thing is, I said it would have been interesting if, whilst he became religious, he didn't adopt a particular look. Like, I wonder how things would have been different. Would have that made a different impact on, because in that part of the world, to be religious is associated with a particular look.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I think they wouldn't have given the time and place. They would just be like, who's this guy? He's not dressed in a certain way. Why is he talking about religious stuff? I think that's what happened to him.
and we don't have a middle step.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you have people who are just not religious in that part of the world, and they're just your normal people. And then you have the religious clergy and who want to look like the clergy. And you don't have anything in between.
Right. You're seeing the stereotype being broken, UK and the US. You're seeing this jubba wearing sheikh. That stereotype is being broken, but you're not seeing it being broken in important places where there's so many more Muslims, like in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia.
And I thought as a thought experiment, we were just thinking that I wonder, like, imagine he kept. I'm just saying, like, imagine he wore slick suits and didn't adopt a particular look necessarily with the way he did. I know he got involved with the Tablighi Jamaat and then they had that whole understanding, this is how you look. But I'm just saying, imagine he didn't adopt that look and he kept that kind of slick, cool look that he was known for. I wonder how he could have possibly inspired maybe a whole generation to become more connected with the deen.
Yeah.
It's a thought experiment, but I'm just saying it's interesting that because there's many people, you see, people want a connection with God, but most people don't want to look like a particular thing.
Right.
Like most Muslims I'm speaking about, they just want to be normal, but they do want a connection. But then they kind of feel that, well, I can't look like that, so I can't have this connection. And if they do try to have a connection, they kind of look down upon.
Right.
By that circle, the practicing, like, oh my God, you haven't even got the sunnah beard. Oh my God, you don't even dress. Oh my God, you don't do hijab. Oh my God, you don't do. And so it kind of leaves people just back to their own, like, oh, forget it. Like, I can't really be a part of this. And I think then
Isn't young Muslims, I don't know if you notice in your social media following, but aren't you seeing that a lot more younger Muslims from Pakistan and India and other parts of the Muslim world are following Western scholars, and their messages are being heard over their own local scholars, right? And I think because they're finding the Western scholarship something that they can identify with more easily rather than their local scholarship. At least from our own Facebook following, we've noticed at least like half of our following is from India, Pakistan, and the Middle East, So I don't know if you noticed that from your own following.
I mean, like, I know people like, Ustad Noman Ali Khan, he's done certain things over there and he's done certain things in Urdu, and even in his English thing, they have been circulated and they are coming in contact with, obviously there's the language barrier. Sometimes their English may not be as good, but that's because people are they're just fed up. I think like people are so fed up. Like it's shocking what we've turned this deen into.
Right.
Like we've turned it into, this is what I mean about when I said the institutionalization, like we've turned it into just control.
Right.
Like it's only about controlling people. It's about, well, I control you and you don't ask questions and you just follow and everything is like wrong. And, it's like, to question what I'm saying is I pit you immediately against Allah. Like, oh my God, so you don't believe in Allah then? And
I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you one thing real quick. My neighbors in India. My neighbor is an MP in the parliament, and I will tell you that the most of the people that come to his home are the most the scholarly or the religious people who are the leaders of their communities, and they are given all these gifts. And these are things that we've witnessed firsthand. We've seen them getting cars and other things as gifts. And then you wonder, well, how is this influencing what they're saying to their following, the people who are in their villages and whatnot? So it's important what you just mentioned, that scholarship has become, at least in the Muslim world in general, has become a means to control people.
You see, and the thing is as well that Islam, you see, what it ought to be about is truth. Yeah, like you said earlier on about a truth paradigm, about truth. The thing is that, yes, like you or one of the other speakers said earlier on about colonialism, it had its horrific elements. Now, it did cause a disconnect in the Muslim world. And a lot of people today, they have a deep-seated kind of hatred for the West, for what's happened in the past. The issue with this is now, as a reaction, anything that could be linked to the West is seen as it must be wrong.
Right.
And the problem is that even if it's a good thing, it will still be seen as wrong. Like, imagine if it's a good thing, like I give the example of things like human rights. Now, people will, even though one could easily say, well, look, in Islam, obviously Islam advocates human rights. But yet even this term, this thing, they will say, oh my God, this isn't, I don't know, this is not coming from, it's come from the West, and we don't want to affirm anything that's coming from the West. We don't want to. So they're in this reactionary mode. Now imagine that's to do with things that in essence could complement Islam. They're not even against Islam. How would one feel if they were things which could challenge certain understandings of Islam? So the issue is that Muslims in certain parts, especially the influencing parts from you could say like the Indo-Pak world or the middle, like the Gulf, especially Saudi Arabia, these countries influence a lot of, especially in the UK, presumably the US, the notion of Islam here. So people are very reactionary, and they have this thing of, so justice has very little to do with it. Now, and trying to seek out truth has very little to do with it. The other thing is that they say, well, why have these criticisms come from the West? Sometimes certain things will be criticized. See, what a lot of people refuse to kind of acknowledge is that naturally, when somebody is viewing what you are presenting, they will be more critical of it. In the past, they haven't had access to stuff like Islam the way it's been made available today. Muslims, the world wasn't kind of metropolitan the way it is today, cosmopolitan the way it is today. So Islam a lot of it has been translated into English. So it's left people criticizing a lot of Islam now. Naturally, you will get bad elements. You will get people who are doing this with prejudice, but you will get people doing this with curiosity. They will be saying, oh, well, look, it's what, Sheikh Sheikh Omar Abdullah from the US, when he says in one of his things what he calls the flies in the ointment. And he says, well, you see, you might not be noticing the fly, but when somebody else comes, they will say, hey, what's that fly in the ointment? It's because it's a fresh pair of eyes. And it's viewing what you have been, you've just been brought up with. So you've been brought up not to question. Secondly, in the Muslim communities, and especially in the Muslim world, and even in this part of the world or in the US, Muslim communities have a huge sense of censorship. They don't allow people to just ask questions all the time. They don't mind basic questions like, oh, how do I pray? How do I do this? But when you start asking the why, they only answer a bit and then they tell you off. So, if you said, well, why is this like this? Well, why is it like, but I don't understand this stuff. Well, why is it? They'll just tell you, listen, but Bani Israel asked a lot of questions and look what they blah, blah, blah.
Don't be like Bani Israel.
You'll get told off.
Yeah.
So we have this culture of silence, like silencing out questions because questions are difficult to answer. But you can't do that with non-Muslims. So they will question the deen. They will question. So hence today we have a lot more of questions being hurled at Islam. And some of them, yes, are with prejudice, but some of them, even if they are with prejudice, it becomes a duty to now evaluate and answer. Because once a question has risen, it's not going to go away. So we have a lot of, and the problem is that then you have this reaction coming, you see, on some of these ulama groups in the Arab world. And I remember recently they got into this discussion and said, people shouldn't answer this because or they shouldn't really try to give in trying to provide explanations for things like this because you're just giving into the Almaniyin and these kind of secularists and these Western thought, which is nothing but the enemy of Islam. And I was like, what? What are you guys on about? Look, these are now questions which we have. Like, these will affect Muslims as well.
Muslim youth will ask the same exact questions. Muslim youth will ask the same exact questions that every single one of these groups is asking, right?
Exactly, and you can't. And it's about time. And this is what I think what Sheikh Yasir Qadhi was saying when there was this whole issue with the email thing, I think over a year back that had happened, was what he was trying to say is that I think certain aspects of Islam have to be reevaluated. Like, as in, we have to kind of put a fresh pair of eyes on them and think and look at, and there's certain schools, and I think he was talking more in terms of Aqidah and stuff like this when he said about the certain schools traditionally, they arose to deal with the issues of their age, which was the Hellenistic thought that was coming in. A lot of this Aristotelian issues and Greek philosophical issues that Muslims had as a challenge, they dealt with. But today this is not our challenge, trying to deal with what Thales or with what, Heraclitus or with what other people had presented from, whether it's what Aristotle or Plato had said, and people don't care about this today. Today, science and other things have presented problems. Now, to Islam, let's just say. Now, Muslims have to kind of rise to the challenge and say, well, that's interesting. Well, let's take a look at this. And I say this, that one unfortunate thing, I don't know how this is in the US on the ground, but I fear that Muslims are wrongly placing themselves on the wrong side of science unnecessarily. I mean, maybe that's not where you guys are, but I felt sometimes like Muslims, you see, you get two responses. Like if you ask people, what do you think about Islam and science? One response is, yeah, of course, Islam is compatible with science. There's no clash. There's a lot of scientific miracles in the Quran. And we have that side. But then we have this other side, which is very kind of, scientists think they're God and they think they know it all. And, science is, they're only theories and they're only this and they're only that. And there's this very kind of one, you could say, skeptical, which, okay, I mean, there's no harm in being skeptical at times, but almost like an antagonistic position to science. And I think that Islam has historically never had this clash with science. So I don't think we need to start doing that now in an age when science has really blossomed and like boosted. So from all ages, we choose this age to place ourselves on the opposite side of the fence.
Well, the problem is that science is constantly evolving, and I think a lot of Muslims are trying to confirm their beliefs through science.
That's
right?
the problem.
Sure, but I think if it evolves, evolve with it. Right. I don't see any harm in, because science is just human knowledge, isn't it? Like, as human knowledge grows, our knowledge of the deen will grow.
But there's a certain group of Muslims who want to justify or use science as a proof that the Quran is a miracle or whatnot. But I think
that kind of stuff is nonsensical. I think like people that used to do all this how do you know the Quran is the word of God? Well, it's got this embryology in it, it's got this in it, it's got that in it. I think that kind of stuff is outdated now, and even they're realizing that, okay, we better brush up, and people who try to say, the Quran is the word of God because there's no contradictions in the Quran.
Right.
I mean, that is such an outdated argument because, it's like that was on one of these TV shows, and the lady said, "Yeah, well, Harry Potter's got no contradiction in it. I mean, what's the point?" That's what she said, and she said to the guy who kept, they had this sheikh on there who kept saying, "There's not one contradiction in the Quran. In the Quran, there's not one contradiction." And she goes, well, there's no contradiction in Harry Potter. What's your point?
But that teaches us, right? We have to change our discourse. We can't bring our discourse to that level because everyone can say anything. It becomes very subjective, right? I
think the issue is that what Muslims, a lot of the people are doing is they're reading up arguments which were for a particular date and time.
Yes.
And these arguments were relevant. They were relevant in that time. So, when people were arguing against Christians who were using the Bible and Muslims were using the Quran, and they're saying, but that's got contradictions, this has got no contradictions. it was relevant. When Muslims were arguing against, Neoplatonism or Aristotelianism or these kind of things, or the Hellenistic thought, or they were arguing against, these things were relevant. When people were arguing against a certain culture and trying to speak about the miracles of the Arabic language, because the Arabs were obsessed with Arabic at the time, and they were trying to show, well, look how amazing this language is, that was relevant. Today, this is irrelevant. It doesn't make any, it's like the person trying to, somebody trying to speak to one of these, major physicists in trying to say, well, yeah, but the Quran is the word of God. Why? Because the Arabic language is so awesome. And the guy's like, well, that's just dumb because, first of all, I don't speak Arabic. Secondly, you don't even speak Arabic. Thirdly, if this was really for the whole of mankind, then how are the whole of mankind supposed to appreciate the Arabic language?
Right.
Unless we're all supposed to be Arabs. So what's your point? And so, the person or other people realize that you're using an outdated argument that was good for its time. It's not good for this time. So, I mean, these are just thoughts. I'm just saying. I mean,
do you have an argument for today's time?
I think today's time, you see, this is a good question. I think today's time is not about stuff like this. I don't think, in my understanding today, it's not about the artistry of the language of the Quran and stuff. I think, yes, these things are there for whoever finds them fascinating and they strike a chord with them. But I don't think that is what it's about. I think what it's about is, we have to, it's weird, but we have to understand what Islam in essence came for. In my understanding, it came to connect with the Creator. That's the primary focus of Islam, that recognizing a Creator. I do feel that one of our greatest challenges in this time, like us, especially in the West, is dealing with some of the most complicated challenges that have risen. And that is to do with stuff like the scientific challenges that have been posited, the kind of quantum physics challenges, the hard questions that have risen, and ethics. I think in grappling with these issues, that is perhaps our challenge of the age.
And when you say science, are you referring to atheism too in that? Like the mental gymnastics?
Definitely. I mean, I think... Muslims have got this strong hatred for, not all Muslims, certain Muslims, for, people like atheists and stuff like this. I don't necessarily share that kind of hatred or strong kind of thing to. I think a lot of people that, you see, they're fed up of religion, and you can't blame them. Like they've come to a point where they're just fed up. Like they see religion as not answering true questions and being just outdated and irrelevant and all about control, and they don't want to be a part of it. And there are some people who are, some atheists who are just kind of just sore about religion. They've had a bad experience, so they just hate on religion. I accept that. That's true. But so I think but in general, I think it's worthy to listen to people, listen to their points of view, and to try and think, well, that's an interesting point.
Of course.
And how would we truly answer that? Like, you've actually got a valid point. Let me not kind of be just in a state of denial. Let me accept that is a decent point that you're making. Okay, how would we answer that? And let's try to go about finding an answer for that, because I believe Islam does have all the answers, but I think they have to be unearthed. They have to, and it will involve interpreting certain things in light of our own age.
Yeah.
Ethical issues, things to do with ethics, topics like evolution. I think these things are huge challenges which Muslims have not yet really dealt with. I think things like I spoke about recently as well on the Monday nights with Mufti, the predestination, stuff like this, destiny, free will, and how things like quantum physics can shed a lot more light for us probability waves, stuff like this, how that, the whole quantum eraser, delayed choice experiment, how this shows that space-time, things like this are different. Time is different. How things are, it's not how we thought it was. And these things actually add a lot more clarity to the debate of free will versus determinism. And I think Muslims need to tap into this discourse, and they need to also use that to explain rather than having the old, because when we just refer to old things, it scares away a lot of people from religion as well.
Yeah.
Because people today, when you just tell people, and when you play semantics with people, some people, okay, they'll just be quiet. Other people will get fed up.
Yeah.
So when you say to people ask about free will and you go, oh, no, you got free will, don't worry. Oh, but you haven't really. Oh, but you have, but you haven't. Oh, but at the end of the day, you have. Although really you're just being forced to do what you're being done. And people are like, what the hell are you saying? Why haven't I got it?
I think the only one that's actually, we know of a name, and you probably know more, but who's actually spearheading this idea itself is Hamza Torsis, right? He's tried to make an attempt, and he still does, to debate the biggest names of atheism and talk about it in a very scientific way too. And have you guys ever done? Yeah.
You see, the thing is, Hamza Torsis, I always struggle with his name. Thing is, he's a great person. He's done a lot of great things. But to be honest with you, I don't personally agree with a lot of the way he's kind of done things. I have watched his lecture with Professor Lawrence Krauss and stuff like that. And I, unlike a lot of people, didn't see the good in it. I kind of felt that, look, like, okay, there's a lot of philosophical jargon, and yes, you definitely have a lot of charm to you. And the crowd is Muslim, so they're going to cheer for you regardless. But you're not actually engaging the debate. Like, he's presenting a debate and you're not engaging it. Now, you see, the problem with that is, I think either don't take on people that are so huge, or take them on when you're ready to take them on. Like, I think if you...
Are you talking about the jargon he uses? Like, there's a lot of, it's very jargon heavy, a lot of scientific or philosophical terms.
But he doesn't answer his questions, you see. And,
right.
And you see, the thing with Lawrence Krauss is that Lawrence Krauss isn't he's not very charming in his debate. So he doesn't come across, but if you look at his points, like when he asks him, okay, how does something come out of nothing, whatever. And then he says to him, okay, what about a photon? Doesn't that come out of nothing? Now, he's like, now he just kind of like, just turns the topic back to, and I know he's referring to a lot of philosophy and, kind of philosophical jargon. But today it's not about philosophy anymore. It's about science. Right. It's not about like, I know he's saying, well, Occam's razor, and we do this and we do that. And, according to this, we call this in philosophy this, and we call this. And it sounds impressive to people that, think, oh, wow, because I don't fully understand it, it must be really good as an answer. But in essence, it's not. It's not actually answering his question at all.
But I'm sorry. No, so the one thing I did realize is he defines the term that he's talking about, and from what I understand, he answers it pretty decently. He defines what's being said, and he answers it. But I think what he does, this is what I've taken from him, is that he's trying to, he's not concerned with non-Muslims. I think he's concerned with Muslims not being confused about.
Yeah, but it's like let's take that debate as an example.
Yeah.
Now that's a really big name he took on. Yeah. Now, to be honest with you, had it been a non-Muslim crowd, he would have been annihilated. But it was only because it was a Muslim crowd that they were going to cheer for him regardless. The second thing was that, you see, he turned that debate. First of all, okay, the topic of that debate was useless. It was is religion good for you, or is which even Dr. Krauss said, or Professor Krauss said, look, why the hell are we even discussing this? Like, it doesn't even make much sense. But the thing is, in that point, he kind of says, whilst he's discussing with him, he turns the topic into this whole thing of the Arabic language is what proves the Quran is so...
is the word of God.
Yeah, it's the word of God. Now, which once again comes back to that point, which is so silly, because like, how does the Arabic language prove that this must be the word of God?
No, I don't think he was saying Arabic language. I think he was saying the structure of the Quran in the Arabic language is how to prove it.
I think Mufti's point is, though, real quick, is that like Dr. Cross doesn't know Arabic, so why are you bringing that point up, right?
No, but he doesn't know Arabic, and this is the point where Dr. Krauss says to him, "Oh, do you understand Arabic?" And he says, "No," and then he just makes a joke like "Kayfa haluka," and the audience start laughing. But the point was that, look, you yourself don't understand Arabic, so these things of the miracle, the miraculous structure of the Arabic language is an outdated argument, because most Muslims in the world today, and even the Arabs today, most of them don't understand that kind of artistry. It's like a very kind of very
I see what you're saying.
niche science to do with rhetoric.
Before we continue, I want you to continue on this. So, for the general individual, or every Muslim should know that the miraculous nature of the Quran lies within the structure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke the kalam, which is the Quran. But that's just a general understanding. But now to debate it at a high level, you have to understand it at that level, or else it doesn't give it its proper merit.
You see, the thing is, my understanding is, look, the Quran came. The Quran is a miracle, of course. It's a miracle in the sense that, what it came with, what the capacity it has, the message it carries. And it primarily came for the Arabs of its time. That's what it primarily came for. We are, by extension, the people it reaches. Now, when it came with this, look at the structure message, this was aimed at the Arabs of its time who could appreciate it. Most people beyond that stage will never appreciate that.
They won't appreciate it, but that is the factor, right? That is what makes it the miracle. Everything else is kind of the package deal. But even though it just came for the Arabs, and I'm not disagreeing with you, just so it's clear for the listeners, is that is the miraculous nature of the Quran, though, right? The structure. We may not understand it. Let's say even the 3 generations of the Sahaba didn't understand it like the Sahaba would understand its miraculous nature, but that is what makes it the miracle, right? Musa alayhi salam threw his staff, and the magicians couldn't replicate it, so they knew it wasn't from a human being, it's from Allah. The similar way, when they heard the Quran, they knew that it's not from a man, right?
I think this point is not, like, this point isn't highly stressed in the Quran itself. The Quran does tell the people, okay, bring something like this. If you want to kind of go ahead, if you want to bring something like onto this. But it's not the stressed kind of point of the Quran. Doesn't make a point of it all the way. Like, this is, wow, like, look, test me. Like, it does say, okay, you guys are really, your Arabic is up there. Go on, then bring something like onto this. So I can see this point that you're saying that, look, the i'jaz of the Quran, its miraculous nature is in its structure. Okay, I can see that. I don't personally believe that is the major miracle of Islam, but okay, fair enough. I mean, that could be one of the features of the Quran. But beyond that initial point, I think it becomes a bit immaterial to the discourse, because most people never understand that. The problem with emphasizing this point is then to deny the universality of Islam. Because if the Quran is if the whole miracle is about the intricacy of the structure of the Quran, of the Arabicness of the Quran, then that means the message was never really for humanity. The message was obviously for a specific type of Arabs. That's it. Who are a tiny fraction of humanity.
Of course.
So you see, to preach to a non-Muslim who is not an Arab, that, wow, God, the amazing thing, the proof of God is my language, the Arabic language, is going to come across as nothing but arrogant. And it's going to come across as, it's definitely not going to be convincing. It's like somebody telling you that, God, the proof of God is Japanese. Why? Because God spoke to, through the Buddha and through his disciples, and these people, through their particular writings, have preserved something in Japanese. But it's classic Japanese, and only if you know classic Japanese, then you can know God.
So I think we might be talking about two different...
I don't really care. I don't want to learn Japanese.
I think Amir... I think we're talking about two different things here. The reason why I'm saying that is because if there's a miraculous nature of the Quran, now if that miraculousness is laced with saying that there's one creator, and Allah proves that also, that's obviously there's multiple miracles in that, right? But it makes it now impossible for the Arab of that time, because he knows the structure is a miracle, that anything that's within that is a speech from the creator talking to them directly. So it kind of brings them to the level, raises their level to be like, okay, everything in this is true because I can't bring anything like it, and I know for sure that a man didn't bring this, right? And I get your point too, but I think what we're talking about is the feasibility of convincing somebody that it's a miracle becomes almost impossible if they don't understand the Arabic language, but it's still a fact.
Yeah, but the point is, if it's a fact, right? If it's a fact, right? Why do we emphasize it? We shouldn't emphasize it in a dialogue with non-Muslims.
If we start pushing this,
right?
If we start pushing this, the question would be that, well, because you're speaking in a very open audience now, who can criticize and question anything.
Yes,
it's not like, remember, we're not in that Muslim closet censorship environment anymore. So when you say something, it can be criticized. So if you say that Muslims never brought or people never brought anything like this, what's your proof that they never challenged it?
I think that requires someone to say that. Someone to bring that argument, they have to be a specialist in the Arabic language, or else it would make no sense to bring it up, right?
Yeah, but then it's a redundant point, isn't it? Because none of us can assess that level of, so it makes it a bit redundant. It's just like saying, well, I believe it, but I can't assess it. And nobody else can assess it, so...
I think that's the study of balagha, right? I think a lot of people, there are specialists in the Arabic language, right? I think that they can, if somebody tries to bring something like it, they can.
But the question is, they're all Muslim.
You're right.
Yeah, no,
I agree with you. 100%.
I mean, okay. So let me jump in here real quick. Like, break this. So the argument is atheism and debating atheists and like even working with like Muslim kids who are like borderline, like thinking about leaving Islam.
Yeah.
So they don't know Arabic.
You're right.
So why are you? This point is irrelevant to the conversation.
I believe it's irrelevant. But I'm saying is that I believe no one should bring it up if they don't understand the Arabic language, especially if they don't understand it.
Right.
If they're specialists and the person that they're debating is a specialist in the Arabic language, like if they're debating a Arab who's a specialist in the Arabic language, and the Muslim who's bringing up is a specialist in the Arabic language, then it's feasible to bring that statement up.
Pragmatically, how often is that going to happen?
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
But I'm saying that
the thing is this: when you say, like, we know historically, right, that people like, for example, several people did attempt to challenge the Quran. We know this, historically, like in the time of the Prophet, after the Prophet, like Musaylim al-Kadhdhab, other people brought their versions of small verses. Now, the question would be, obviously, they did have followers. We know this too. Yeah, they had followers. Now, the question would be that people would say, but look at this dumb verse that they made up. Here's one, al-fil, mal-fil, wa ma adraka mal-fil, dhayluhu qasir wa khurtumuhu tawil. Do you know the elephant? And what about the elephant? And so on and this and that. But remember, this is the transmission that Muslims have allowed to be transmitted. Like, remember, there's going to be a lot of standardization along the way. There's going to be a lot of control. What about the other verses that they didn't transmit from him? What about people like there was really eloquent people in the past like Abdullah ibn Muqaffa, who was really eloquent. That he was of Persian origin, and some of the he's from the time of the Salaf, and he wrote several things anyway, which are still available. But they then questioned him of heresy or kufr. Why? Because some of the things he brought up, he challenged the Quran with them, with his eloquence. And then obviously people said, well, he's not a Muslim and he's just a hidden Zoroastrian and stuff like this, Zindiq. And my point is, you see, when you say these things that nobody's challenged it, most likely nobody's transmitted it, because Muslims wouldn't allow, because they had a culture of censorship. They wouldn't allow things like that to be transmitted. So I don't see the point in emphasizing this when, one, we say that, look, nobody can measure it anyway, and two, those people, we know it was challenged, but we only see the poor specimen that people produce because they wouldn't allow any other specimen to be transmitted.
But that's that's kind of with the preconceived notion that they weren't being honest.
Historically, they just killed those people. So if we're going to be absolutely honest, like, we can't. There isn't much point in arguing this, because today this will be questioned. Because we're not in a state of censorship. So when people say things like this, other people who do know will say, well, actually, didn't so-and-so challenge it and they were just killed?
Well, what central theme from the Quran do you think should we, as Muslims, be propagating to the West or people non-Arab speaking people? What quality of the Quran should we be explaining to?
Because there has to be a quality that
to everyone.
Allah says in the Quran that when they question Allah's reality, they question this.
Yeah.
Allah says, وَسَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا.
Yeah.
And we will show them our signs. Fil afaqi. And people would say this is the horizons. But in my understanding, beyond that, in the cosmos, وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, and inside them. And people said that, this is, physiological, like within organs and within body. But beneath that even, I believe that Allah meant when you go from the greatest of signs, the greatest of measures, like the cosmos, to the smallest of measures, which is the quantum world. That when you سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. And once you reach that level, حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. At that point, it will become manifest that this was the truth. Now, we as human beings are on this journey to kind of discover. I do feel that people have this kind of inbuilt need to reach out to the transcendent. I think our message it's interesting when you say, what should our message be today to people? Our message should be of what the message always was, that, سَمْعَنَّنَا سَمِعْنَا مُنَادِيًا, that we heard somebody call out. What message did he call out with? What was the first command? فَعْلَمُوا أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا, that there is indeed one creator. That this is our message. This was the message that all prophets were sent with all messengers were sent with. The message, primary message was never things like, how do you cut your hair, or how do you do things like these are like tertiary aspects.
Yeah,
of
insignificant.
Insignificant compared to the great message, which was that there is a creator. Then people will say today that, look, if there truly is a creator, then how does this A, B, and C make sense? And then our challenge is to shed some light on that does make sense. Just so people can be at peace at recognizing that, look, there is this creator. And they don't have to be driven away because they feel, how can there be a creator if A, B, and C? And we have to then deal with that. That's the way I see things. The Quran, I feel we do need to give that great importance. I feel that the Quran, it carries a message of, it encapsulates the narrative of Islam. Unfortunately, today, the Quran has been kind of placed in the background. And we've already got our image of what Islam ought to be. But when we read so for example, when I said earlier on about things like, look, people ask about free will.
Yeah.
When you read the Quran addresses you as though you have complete free will.
SubhanAllah, that's true actually.
Like, it addresses you, look, don't do this, this will be punished, this has a reward, look, there's consequences, don't do this, can I not entice you towards a Jannah, can I not do this? It's addressing you as though you have free will. Why would it be addressing you if it just controls you like that? When we read the Quran, it teaches you, look, la ikraha fid deen, there is no compulsion in Islam. Why don't you look? Why can I not interest you in Islam? Shall I tell you about an investment that is good for you? This is da'wah at its best. It's speaking to people about the nature of Islam. But today, this has become kind of like background stuff, and it's all about, look, no, if a person doesn't believe, if he doesn't do this, then he's doomed to this. Then if he's already Muslim, then it's, if he decides to question Islam, he's an apostate, he deserves death, he deserves this, she deserves. You see, this is what is causing damage to Islam, in my understanding. It's not about, it's not the concept of God. It's the fact that Islam appears so kind of mutilated that nobody wants, that people are, okay, they're stuck with it because they're born with it. But otherwise, they kind of, they're struggling with it.
And you know what? One thing that you mentioned is the simple nature of the speech of Allah to His creation, and sometimes people find that not advanced enough. That I think I've came across that problem too, where people don't like to talk about everything you just mentioned right now. Let me invite you to this. Let me invite Allah Subhanahu wa Taala addressing us. But to a lot of people, it doesn't seem as academic, and they write it off very quickly. And it seems too oversimplistic. And that is the very reason I think why Allah Subhanahu wa Taala speaks to us that way, because everyone can understand it, yet it's a very deep way of pondering upon your very existence and your Creator speaking to you, right? So I think people write it off very quickly for that reason, unfortunately.
And really, that sounds like the solution is that every Muslim, as they're studying the Deen, that's something they stress. So, because at the end of the day, it's like because we live amongst non-Muslims, and when you're questioned about something, and usually it's not belligerently, they have an honest question. Very curious. Yeah. You have you're able to articulate really what the foundations is, rather than. And I've had problems with this myself. Sometimes dealing with Muslims who are like fringe, and just using the Arabic. I remember I was taking the Bayin, a 10-day course at Noman Ali Khan, like in 2007, and a relative of mine was like really questioning it and like Islam, and I was like, oh, but you don't understand Arabic. I was getting a little taste of it, and I was like, oh, this is crazy, but like that doesn't translate to him, right? And I think that's where we have to just get better. I think first of all, it's like studying, and before we wrap up here,
studying is definitely. I think and I don't mean in any way. I'm very passionate about things like the Arabic language and encouraging people to learn Arabic and to become a part of this legacy, because really we can only access it we can only access the richness of the legacy that's been left behind through the Arabic language, because that's what most of the things were written in. So I didn't mean in any way to kind of detract from that greatness. But I do feel that today we have to also be prepared to recognize that maybe some things that we think are Islam, maybe they're not. Or maybe they are a version or an opinion within. Of course. It's not the kind of thing. Like, it's the version. You see, it's like the way I gave this, I don't know, like a simile to it. It's like saying, so imagine you had a TV series. So you could choose anyone, like, let's just say a popular one, like, I don't know, Breaking Bad, or you took something that was a very popular TV series with it had so many kind of series to it. Now, you imagine you had 30 seconds to just select clips to kind of summarize that. Now, you could summarize it as a comedy. You could take out the comical parts. That's true. And summarize it as that. That's true. You could summarize it as like a very violent thing you could summarize it as a drama. You could summarize it about the family points. You've only got 30 seconds to choose different clips from all the seasons. Now, none of you are necessarily wrong. Okay? None of you are necessarily, but you're not truly encapsulating the whole thing. Now, imagine one person took out a particular aspect of it, and then many people take that aspect. What happens over time, it starts to get standardized. So when it reaches people so many generations later, if the majority of the people kept deciding on a particular kind of summary, that will then become known as the thing. Yes. This is exactly what's happened with Islam as well, and religions. It's just been standardized over time into a particular narrative which certain people have just agreed on and accepted. It didn't mean the other aspects are invalid. It just meant they got kind of drowned out through the standardization process. Yes. And maybe some of those things will be more suitable for our day and age. Maybe they would answer more questions in our kind of context. And so, maybe this obviously comes back to the ulama today or students of knowledge to kind of investigate that, to kind of see because we have a duty that, you see, there's something transmitted that you should be wary how you address people. Hadithun nas qadra uqulihim. That's address them in light of their reason and intellect. Atuhibbu an yukadhab Allah wa rasuluhu. Do you wish that Allah and His Messenger be denied because of something you say? So this is a fear that may be actualized. Like we may be preaching certain aspects or teaching certain aspects, which may end up driving a lot of people away from the deen. So, I mean, these are just my kind of thoughts, my angles on things. Nobody has the answers to everything, but we all kind of contribute our angle, I guess. And I think students of knowledge, scholars, or people taking an interest in studying the deen should explore these kind of things, maybe look at contemporary issues, see what can be, maybe like I always say, look, within Islam, there's certain things which are always stable, and there's certain things which will always change. This is how Imam Shatibi refers to the thawabit wal mutaghayyirat, those things. So obviously they're being one Allah, they're being one, certain things are established.
Yeah.
And certain things are subject to change. They can change based on your understanding.
Static and dynamic, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like a kind of static and a kinetic kind of almost force that you have. And I think a good example is like people, like Sheikh Shanqiti. When I share this quite often sometimes, when he was asked about when people told him about the moon landing. And if you read if you take a certain reading of the Quran, that appears to be impossible to land on the moon, because a certain reading of the Quran places the moon in the heavens and not in our sky. So it says, وَجَعَلَ الْقَمْرَ فِيهِنَّ, in the heavens, in the plural. So the thing is, well, according to that, human beings shouldn't be able to access it. So, when they told him this and they said, well, what do you have to say about this? And he said, well, look, this is one of two possibilities. One, that this is a hoax and it's not true and whatever. And he said, and the other, which he said is more likely, is that we've never perhaps truly understood the verse until now. That maybe we need to revisit our understanding of the verse. And that's some profound words. So
and I just want you to know, it didn't come off as if you were undermining at all the Arabic language and stuff. Mashallah, it totally showed your depth and how much you actually thought about this, and that's all it showed. So yeah, man, that was an awesome conversation. I think it made us think deeper. No, it was. I think it was awesome. I don't
know how confusing it is for anybody that listens.
It's not going to be confusing, inshallah.
I almost feel like we have to do a separate show about just your mindset, because like you're someone who's studied in traditional seminaries, and you're your own guy, right? And a lot of people, most people, I feel like, who are classically trained are just parroting the same whatever they learn, more or less, and there isn't really much thought. And we talked about this a little bit. If you have a chance, have you ever met Joe Bradford?
I've heard about him. Well, he's in the U.S., isn't he?
He's in the U.S., yeah. So he's a bachelor's and master's from Medina. But, again, we talked a lot about he had some opinions that are like necessarily seen as like kind of out there.
He was on our podcast too. You can, if honestly, and I'm not just saying this to plug it to make you listen to our podcast. I swear that's not the intention. Okay. If you were to listen to it whenever you have an opportunity and just give us your feedback, we can do something.
One of your podcasts.
Yeah, we can definitely do a collab with you and him too someday, inshallah.
It's called Dynamics of Islamic Law. Dynamics of Islamic Law and Fiqh, right? So we recorded it over ISNA weekend.
I'll give it. I love listening to different podcasts and stuff, and so.
Yeah, and I think it would be really cool if we one day can get together and you two are in the same room and we all have a discussion. I think it'd be pretty awesome. It'd be epic.
Mufti, when was the last time you were in America? Was it St. Louis a couple years ago?
Yeah, it was. I went there twice, actually. And,
okay.
It's been, a couple of years now. So.
Okay.
It's good. America, alhamdulillah, it's good. I don't know about the whole Trump thing now and how difficult he's made it for people to visit and stuff, but
everything's gone a little pear-shaped, isn't it? Everything got a little pear-shaped.
I think at that time I was kind of shocked by not shocked, but I was kind of taken aback, if you like, by their reaction of I was at a university, at that St. Louis University, whatever, giving some of the lectures there, but they get really offended by certain what they consider swears. the profanity of speech. It's so interesting because they consider the word damn really offensive.
Yeah.
I totally don't know. And so I was asked on a few occasions, would you stop, there's been some requests if you'd just be a bit mindful about swearing in your lectures. So I actually thought that I may have accidentally actually sworn in the lecture. Like I thought,
like you got an S-bomb or something.
I thought, did I actually swear? I didn't realize I swore. Because I'm usually I can, keep things like that under control, so I wouldn't just swear and stuff like that. So I thought, well, maybe it happened, or maybe I kind of said it under my breath, but people heard it. And
you should have said to
anyway,
him.
I gave this whole lecture again, and they complained again.
You should when they said that complaint about swearing, you should have been like, "You taking a piss?"
No, and then I said, I was told, they're talking about damn. And I was using it so much even after that, I was like, God damn.
No, yeah.
Like, come on, people.
We have a lot of language police here and whatnot, and sometimes one of the things we try to do on the podcast is talk about issues that like people like really, because it's really three guys just chit chatting. Like imagine like you're in the UK, but if you were here, the format would be we're just having coffee and just chit chatting for like about random stuff, and it's unfiltered and people like it. But a lot of times within the community, like Sim will have. I remember we did a show recently called Dead Bedrooms. Which you think about what that means, dead bedrooms, and the one of the brothers at the masjid.
I would say a few things run through my mind there, but
yeah. I'll leave it to the imagination. You can go check out the show. We published it, but one of the brothers says like, I love your show, but that show you guys got a little too like graphic. I'm like, how else are you going to talk about it without being graphic? I'm sorry,
people are facing real problems in the bedroom, and how are you actually going to not be specific about it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be specific about these things to protect us, right?
I mean, I actually had to, you see, because I get a bit carried away on my Monday nights with Mufti, and I crack all kinds of jokes.
Yeah,
and
I love it. Keep doing it, brother.
And they get a bit shocked with some of the stuff and the humor, and so I actually did one of the answers. I don't know whether it was last week or the week before, but on swearing, I actually where I said, I think a lot of people must have been shocked. I said that swearing isn't haram. There's nothing wrong with swearing, but swearing at somebody, offending them, is haram. But just regular swearing isn't. And people were like, "What the hell?" And then I broke it down and went into some evidences and stuff. But then the jokes in general, I have some of my mates who kind of usually give me feedback, and they always telling me, Mufti, oh no, man, oh no. There was about 2 or 3 places in this last where I thought, oh no, don't. They go, but you did. And the jokes but what the hell? I'm just like, well, don't worry about it, man. It's all good.
It's all good.
I think you gotta break some of the barriers for people, and
yeah,
for sure. No, hey,
break down the mindset.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna let you go. We heard that come up. We've had you on for over 2 hours, so you might be the longest podcast we've ever done.
The longest podcast I think we've ever had. Mashallah, man. And
inshallah. Right, well, it's been awesome talking to you guys, so inshallah, we'll check out the podcast.
And if you ever want to do this again, or you just want to promote something, or you just want to rant or vent, contact us and we can do this again, man.
Hey, real quick, is there any, how can people, learn more? I mean, you have your Facebook page. Is Facebook your most popular medium? You're on Snapchat as well.
Yes, so Facebook,
how can they get in touch with you?
Or Twitter, all with the name Mufti Abu Layth. They can add me, follow me, shoot me any questions, inshallah. I do try to answer. On Snapchat, it's Malm 2014, so MALM 2014. They can add me, inshallah. Fire away with any questions. I do try to respond. That's the main. Inshallah, I'll have my website soon.
Inshallah,
when I stop getting lazy, and that will be another medium. But I mean, yeah, inshallah, and I'll definitely. I've always got a lot to rave and rant about, so
Hey, contact us, man.
Great,
contact us.
Book something up.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. Were really easy to work, to set this show up with. A lot of our listeners, as you can see, they were tagging us in posts. That's what happened.
Yeah.
They were like, when is the Mad Mamluks going to do a show with Mufti Abu Layth? And, and like listeners out there, we give y'all what you want, all right? We got this for you, all right? That's what I'm talking about. We give you what you want. Hope y'all liked it. Mufti Abu Layth, man.
Message him to make sure he comes back on too.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, man. Yeah, start funding. If you want to hear anything else that Mufti Abu Layth didn't talk about, like, man, you always talk about this or that. We talk to you all day, but we got another podcast coming up in like 15 minutes too. We're doing a back-to-back today, man. So,
if you feel this wasn't controversial enough or explicit enough, then that's it. Just fire out those messages, and we'll
do another show, inshallah.
We got to do a roundtable with him. And Mort got to be on the same one.
Yeah, we have another host that is in rotation sometimes, so we'll get him in, inshallah. So, Jazakallah khair, man. We really appreciate it. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We are on Instagram, trying to be a little bit more active there, so check us out there. And if you have an iTunes account, subscribe to us on iTunes, rate us 5 stars. And for you Android folks who are behind the times, you can check us out on Podcast Addict. For our special guest, all the way from Birmingham, United Kingdom, Mufti Abu Layth al-Maliki, and my co-host, Sheikh Amir Saeed and Sim, this is Mahin signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.